This woman was living a happy life with her handsome and wealthy husband. However, in a single moment, she destroyed it all. Her husband had just bought a beautiful brooch, intending to give it to his pregnant wife. But during their romantic dinner, a single sentence from his wife left him completely shocked. She had an abortion. The reason? An interview for a broadcaster position at JBC television. She casually stated, "We can always have another child, but this interview opportunity only comes once." Her husband couldn't believe these words were coming from his own wife. He said in anguish, "I shouldn't have met you in the first place." With that, he left, utterly disappointed. Their relationship was severed from that point on. Afterward, Ran successfully became a broadcaster at JBC. Thanks to her beauty and tireless efforts, she consecutively received top awards at the 5th annual festival. She even earned the title of National Goddess. Yet, all of this came at the cost of her family. For 5 years, she and her husband hadn't spoken a single word to each other, let alone shared any intimacy. Whenever she tried to reconcile, he would always say the same thing. "I don't need anything from you, so you shouldn't either. The only thing I can do is wait for you to leave me. Because I chose you, I have to take responsibility." Though dedicated to her work, she was still just an ordinary woman. Every night, images of happier times would surface in her mind. But the man in those memories wasn't her husband. Today was the 6th time Ran received the prestigious Broadcasting Award. But this year, amidst the congratulations, a different sentiment emerged. Ran is getting old, it's time for someone new. The very next day, a new face appeared alongside Ran on her program. Ran knew this person was eager to usurp her position, but she wasn't willing to give it up. She knew what she had sacrificed to get where she was. Ran immediately sought out the director to inquire about the situation, but received this news. Mentoring the newcomer and having Ran resign is the director's decision. After all, the television station needed to refresh its personnel. However, there was a sudden turn of events with the appearance of a man named Kevin Lee. He was the champion of a world-renowned golf tournament. The company wanted an exclusive interview with Kevin Lee, but numerous stations had tried and failed. The director was also struggling with this issue. Hearing this, Ran knew her opportunity had arrived. She confidently declared, "I will secure the exclusive interview with Kevin Lee." Was that enough? She would solve this difficult problem. The condition was that she would retain her broadcasting job and simultaneously eliminate the newcomer who was constantly challenging her. Because she could solve the company's dilemma, the director agreed. "If you can't do this, then pack your things and leave this station." To keep her job, Ran had no choice but to try. In truth, Ran had no idea who Kevin Lee was. But in her eyes, there was nothing she couldn't do. Just like that year, she hadn't hesitated to abandon her child. And at that very moment, the newcomer who constantly antagonized her approached. After washing her hands, she deliberately splashed water on Ran. Not only did she not apologize, but she brazenly offered a tissue and said, "Wipe it off." Faced with the newcomer's disdainful attitude, Ran refused to be intimidated. "You should apologize." Yet, Jai-1 intentionally provoked Ran further. She told her, "You're old, you should resign. Nobody wants to see a wrinkled old woman on television anyway." Jai-1's words struck a nerve with Ran. Looking at her aging reflection in the mirror, Ran felt a surge of frustration. Only the night kept her company, surrounded by a desolate loneliness. Amidst the brightly colored lights, she felt utterly isolated. Although only a wall separated her from her husband, the distance between them felt insurmountable. However, just before dawn, her assistant called to inform her that Kevin Lee had boarded a plane back to the country. Several television stations had already sprung into action. Time was of the essence. With no time to prepare, Ran had to rush. But at that very moment, her husband stopped her because Ran's mother had suddenly fallen ill. The doctor said she had only a few hours left at most and urged everyone to come see her one last time. Ran froze, recalling the director's words that morning, "Is Ran the only broadcaster we have? There are plenty of talented individuals out there. To save face for you, I gave you the award that should have gone to someone else. She's getting old, it's time for her to resign." He'll only agree if you can guarantee you'll bring Kevin Lee in for an interview. After this recollection, she hesitated. But in the end, she heartlessly told her husband, "I can't go. Even if I go, Mom will still pass away." Her husband was incredulous at her response. Was work more important than her own mother? But Hai Ran didn't answer, turning and leaving him instead. On the way to the airport, Hai Ran kept telling herself that her choice was the right one, because even if she went, her mother would still pass away. Whereas meeting the client at the airport, this opportunity only came once. Just like that year, she had aborted her child for the broadcasting interview. Upon arriving at the airport, Hai Ran was exhausted. She continued forward without noticing the suitcase in front of her, tripping and falling to the ground. A kind man helped her up. But when she saw the man standing before her, she froze. A memory flashed before her eyes. It was a rainy night, and her boyfriend was waiting for her on the way home. Because he had no money and no status, she dumped him. And this man in front of her was that ex-boyfriend Lee Yi-young. "Honey, is this an acquaintance of yours?" A woman's voice suddenly broke through, pulling her back to reality. The woman immediately recognized her. Coincidentally, they were high school best friends. Yoonju, however, was completely unaware of the relationship between Hai Ran and her husband. She cheerfully introduced them. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Kevin Lee's husband. You can call me by my Korean name, Lee Yi-young. They say, old flames die hard." How true. Upon hearing his name, Hai Ran was utterly astonished. Because Kevin Lee's return was so sudden, she hadn't even seen a picture of him. She never imagined that Kevin Lee was her ex-boyfriend. The plans she had prepared earlier now vanished, leaving her speechless. She even felt the urge to flee. However, her ex-boyfriend kept staring at her, his gaze cold and indifferent. After the encounter, her husband had arranged her mother's funeral. The troubles at work, coupled with her mother's sudden death, left Hai Ran numb. She wanted to cry, but not a single tear would fall. Just then, the television program aired. The spot that was once hers was now occupied by another, unknown face. Silently watching the program, Hai Ran's eyes grew cold. She began to eat frantically, as if trying to swallow all her pain. Only when she could eat no more and vomited everything back up, did a dangerous glint appear in her eyes. So, she informed her friend Yoonju of her mother's passing. Then, while Yoonju was visiting to offer condolences, Hai Ran proposed the plan for an exclusive interview with Kevin Lee. Because it's hard for people to refuse someone who has just experienced a loss. Sure enough, the next day, her close friend brought her husband to the television station. The director's face, it must be said, bloomed like a flower. He immediately replaced the day's scheduled broadcaster with Hai Ran. However, when Hai Ran pushed open the door to Kevin's makeup room, prepared to hand him the interview script, she was met with an incredibly awkward scene. The steamy situation and its compelling nature made Hai Ran linger a moment longer than intended. However, she quickly composed herself. After speaking briefly, she hurried away. But Kevin followed her. "Are you scared?" he asked. In front of this man, she always felt so vulnerable. "Please review the script. Don't answer unrelated questions and ruin the broadcast. This isn't a joke. You're not here to clown around." The man she had once looked down upon, the man who had been poor, was now a world champion, gracing her broadcast as a guest. Faced with Kevin's intense gaze, even Hai Ran, a seasoned broadcaster with 7 years of experience, felt apprehensive. But as a professional, she quickly regained her composure and began her work. She asked Kevin Lee about his next goal after winning the world championship. His unexpected reply: "You, go Hai Ran." Hai Ran was utterly shocked. The air in the studio froze. Thankfully, Kevin continued. "Just like Go Hai Ran becoming the top in her field. That's my ultimate goal." The interview finally ended. The program was a resounding success. The director decided he wanted Kevin as the first guest on his upcoming new documentary series. Kevin initially wanted to decline, but upon hearing that Hai Ran would be the host, he agreed. Hai Ran was furious, because according to the director, she had to hand over her current program to someone else and take on this new one. The director had no other choice. Upper management wanted Hai Ran out, but Kevin specifically requested her for his segment. The director could only say helplessly, "Hi Ran, you should stop here. While I still have some consideration for you, resign quietly." By the time she got home from work, it was late at night. She wanted to talk to someone, but her husband was still at the company. Despite numerous calls, he didn't answer once. Just then, her phone rang. Annoyed, she picked up. To her surprise, it was Kevin's voice. Kevin Lee was calling her in the middle of the night, just to ask if she was confident she could handle the new program. Then, he handed the phone to his wife, deliberately making intimate sounds, and the line remained open. Hearing those unsettling noises through the phone, Hai Ran couldn't contain her anger. She wanted a drink, but the refrigerator was filled with only the health supplements her mother-in-law had sent for her grandchildren. Early the next morning, the new broadcaster came to see her. She talked about Kevin Lee's wife Hai Ran's friend and how she was now the envy of every woman. How Hai Ran herself wasn't capable of finding such a good man. Handsome, rich, charming, and kind. Not like someone who's so career-obsessed she neglects her husband. And now she's obediently resigning, isn't she? Clearly aimed at Hai Ran, but without naming her directly. Hai Ran seethed with anger, but she forced herself to endure it. The day's filming focused on the happy life of Kevin Lee and his wife. Seeing their sweet interactions brought back a flood of Hai Ran's own past memories, sweet memories. Desire began to spread within her. A woman as proud as she was, now envious. From afar, Kevin's gaze kept falling on Hai Ran, seemingly unintentionally. After filming ended, Hai Ran happened to see Jae-won bringing coffee to Kevin. She noticed the admiring look in Jae-won's eyes. Coincidentally, her friend had asked her to give Kevin a ride home after work, but she had to leave early due to a prior engagement. Recalling Jae-won's look, a plan suddenly formed in Hai Ran's mind. Intentionally, and within Jae-won's earshot, Hai Ran called a colleague, explaining that she needed to drive Kevin home but had a sudden emergency, asking for the colleague's help. Every word was meant for Jae-won. Not disappointing Hai Ran, Jae-won heard every word. Through Hai Ran's deliberate orchestration, the younger woman fell into the carefully laid trap. Early the next morning, a stack of compromising photos mysteriously appeared on the director's desk. Furious, he immediately revoked Jae-won's position as the main anchor. Jae-won was completely stunned. Only then did she realize she had been played. The coveted position she had worked so hard for was now, thanks to Hai Ran, lost. Furious, she confronted Hai Ran. "Even if you pull such a dirty trick, I won't give up so easily." But Hai Ran was unfazed by Jae-won's threat. Instead, she emphasized, "You certainly don't want those photos to surface online. Once they're posted, you'll definitely be fired. Another woman's man isn't something you can trifle with." With that, she calmly walked away. But weeds must be pulled up by the roots. Hai Ran had no intention of letting Jae-won off so easily. She immediately went to the director and suggested suspending all of Jae-won's programs and reassigning her to post-production work. After all, if the photos were leaked, not only would Jae-won be embroiled in scandal, but the station's reputation would also suffer. Hai Ran's reasoning was sound, so the director agreed. Jae-won was livid. Not only had she lost her most important program, but even her news segment had been taken away. Unable to swallow her anger, she sent the photos to Kevin, saying, "This is all Hai Ran's handiwork. Do something quickly. If these get out, I'll be fired. And you, Kevin Lee, you'll lose your money, your reputation, and your family." That day, Kevin Lee had a meeting at a company to discuss an endorsement deal. As he was leaving, he happened to run into Hai Ran's husband in the elevator. They didn't know each other, but the other man recognized Kevin Lee. Knowing he had been on National Goddess Go Hai Ran's show, the man couldn't resist asking, "What's it like meeting the goddess in person? I hear she's amazing. Her figure is on another level compared to the other anchors. She's stunning even on screen." Kevin Lee played along. "Indeed, she is quite something." The men chuckled. Then T-Wook spoke up. "Slander, even implied, is punishable by up to a year in prison and a fine of up to 2 million won. The man frowned. "What's it to you what other people say? My name is Kang T-Wook. Go Hai Ran is my wife." Upon learning the man's identity, Kevin extended his hand in apology. But lawyer Kang didn't accept it, instead exiting the elevator. Before he could get far, Kevin Lee called after him. I suppose you don't know, Go Hai Ran and I have a trip planned to Thailand together. At the same time, representatives from the Blue House contacted Hai Ran. They wanted to invite her to participate in the selection process for a spokesperson position. After all, Hai Ran was a former broadcaster, her father-in-law a judge, and her husband a top lawyer in the country. If Hai Ran could participate in the month-long evaluation without any issues, both her career and family life would be secure. This meant she had a near 90% chance of securing the position. And then, her career would reach new heights of prestige. Yet, upon returning to the television station, Hai Ran was informed by the director that Kevin had requested to go to Thailand for a photo shoot. As the anchor, Hai Ran was expected to accompany him. She immediately refused. She wanted nothing more to do with Kevin. The director, however, was adamant. Frustrated, Hai Ran confronted Kevin, demanding to know his motive. Kevin frankly admitted he wanted revenge. She asked if his wife knew about this. What was the man she had devotedly cared for over the past 10 years doing? He showed no remorse, even going so far as to ask if her husband knew about their relationship from 10 years prior. Hai Ran confirmed her husband knew she had once dated a man named Kevin Lee. Kevin couldn't help but retort, "Was I just a boyfriend to you?" He claimed they had been everything but married. To drive a wedge between Hai Ran and her husband, he even lied, saying he and his wife were planning a vacation to Thailand together. Her husband didn't respond at the time, but when he got home, he told Hai Ran that he had seen Kevin. Hai Ran immediately tensed, probing about how her husband and Kevin knew each other. She feared her husband would discover the extent of their past relationship. Ti-wook honestly replied that he had introduced her as his wife. "You introduced me? Why? Couldn't you just tell him I was your wife?" No. After 10 years together, Ti-wook recognized his wife's anxiety. He desperately wanted to ask her about the morning's events, to ask if she had planned a trip to Thailand with Kevin. But he swallowed the words. He knew a direct confrontation would be unproductive, and he didn't want to intrude too much into her life. So, he simply said, "I'm tired," and retreated to his study. He opened a drawer and pulled out a long-prepared divorce application. He felt a hollowness inside, like something vital had been lost. Worry plagued Hai Ran, keeping her awake all night. She sat until dawn, seemingly resolute about something. Early the next morning, she went to the director and told him to find someone else. "I'm not going to Thailand," she declared, and left. To her surprise, the director replied, "Then tell the chairman yourself. He's golfing with Kevin Lee right now." Kevin had planned this all along. He had gone directly to the chairman to pressure Hai Ran. But that wasn't the biggest problem. Hai Ran had finalized the script for the news broadcast the previous day, but now there were additional notes on it, left by Jae-won. Furious, she confronted the director, who advised her, "Don't bicker with children." "Children? Is Han Jae-won your daughter?" Hai Ran retorted, her anger overriding her reason. At that moment, Jae-won calmly walked over and sat down, unflinchingly responding to Hai Ran's accusations. The show hadn't even started, and they were already locked in a heated argument. Suddenly, Hai Ran ripped off her headset and told Jae-seok, "If this is what you want, then you do it." Then, turning to Jae-won, she said, "And you, if you want this seat so badly, take it." She angrily threw the script at Jae-won. Storming out of the studio, Hai Ran went straight to the director and demanded a decision. "Do you want Jae-won or me? If you want Jae-won to anchor this show, then I'll pack my things and leave right now." The director wanted her to go to Thailand and give up her show. She couldn't swallow this insult. She stared at him defiantly. With only 5 minutes until airtime, the director was frantic. Neither woman would back down. Finally, with just 1 minute to spare, he caved. He ordered HR to transfer Jae-won to a local station. Jae-won had lost. As she left, humiliated, she encountered Hai Ran. Hai Ran walked right past her, not even acknowledging her presence, as if she were invisible. At home, Ti-wook's mother stumbled upon the prepared divorce application in his drawer. She immediately called her daughter-in-law in for questioning, only to discover that the couple had been sleeping in separate rooms for 5 years. all while she had been diligently providing them with supplements for vitality. Ti-wook's mother, who had never been fond of Hai-ran, urged her to divorce her son. She had tolerated her for years, hoping for grandchildren, but now it seemed pointless. With that, she stood and left. After a moment's hesitation, Hai-ran chased after her mother-in-law and knelt before her. "It's all my fault. 3 years ago, I had an abortion." Hai-ran confessed to having terminated a pregnancy for the sake of her career, admitting her motivation was to gain her father-in-law's approval. He had not attended their wedding. He hadn't even allowed them into his home when they tried to visit. The reason? She was just an ordinary woman. It wasn't until she became an anchor that her father-in-law finally acknowledged her. Her mother-in-law was speechless with shock. Unbeknownst to them, Ti-wook was just outside, overhearing everything. He remembered proposing to Hai-ran. She had clearly stated she didn't love him. She wanted success. She was with him for his family's wealth and status. Unexpectedly, Ti-wook declared that he didn't care. He promised to use his influence to help her advance her career. He rushed forward, ripped up the divorce papers, and told his mother, "Go home. This is between Hai-ran and me. Please don't interfere." After his mother left, the couple sat down together for the first time in a long while. Hai-ran told him about wanting to participate in the selection process and asked for his help. During the month-long investigation period, they couldn't get divorced. They also had to fulfill their promise from that year. Ti-wook agreed, but he had a question of his own. "Why do you want to go to Thailand?" Hai-ran, surprised that he knew, quickly explained, "I'm going for filming. I also heard the Blue House chief secretary is there, and I want to make his acquaintance." "Is that all?" "Yes, that's all." The next day, she and the production crew flew to Thailand. The Thai heat was intense, so Kevin Lee sent Yoon-ju to the mall, telling her she didn't need to bake in the sun with him. His intention was to get her out of the way. But as soon as she left, it started to pour, halting the shoot. Hai-ran, drenched, rushed back to her room to change. Just as she was about to close the door, an arm stopped her. Kevin Lee, ignoring her protests, barged in and pushed her against the wall. They stared at each other. At this proximity, it was either a fight or a kiss. Feigning lingering affection, Kevin recounted the hardships and humiliations he had endured after their breakup. He pleaded for a second chance. Knowing Kevin's true nature, Hai-ran wanted nothing to do with him. "If you don't leave, I'll scream," she warned. Undeterred, he kissed her forcefully. The aggressive kiss trailed from her lips to her neck, their breathing growing ragged. During the struggle, the brooch Ti-wook had given her fell to the floor. Outside the hotel, a taxi pulled up. Inside sat Ti-wook. Their passionate embrace was interrupted by the ringing of the hotel phone. It was the front desk, informing Hai-ran that someone was there to see her. Panicked, Hai-ran straightened her clothes and hurried to the door. Hai-ran was surprised to see her husband, Ti-wook, there. She briefly hoped his arrival signaled a reconciliation, a return to the good times in their marriage. She was wrong. Their marriage was beyond repair. The previous evening, after learning of Hai-ran's intention to apply for the Blue House spokesperson position, Ti-wook had decided to fulfill an old promise, to use his considerable family connections and influence to support her. The Blue House Public Relations Ambassador Hai-ran had been eager to meet was, in fact, his college friend. Hai-ran's emotions must have been complex. Her father-in-law was a former head of the Korean judicial system, and her husband possessed a powerful network. What more could she possibly want? While they were talking, Ti-wook noticed Kevin Lee on another floor of the hotel. A sense of foreboding washed over him. Kevin Lee was holding the brooch Hai-ran had lost at dinner. A scheme seemed to be brewing in his mind. Hai-ran and Ti-wook's friend chatted amiably about public opinion and political stances. Hai-ran remained steadfast in her beliefs, clinging to her original ideals. She had trained as a reporter, and even as a potential Blue House spokesperson, she was determined never to become a tool for others. This reminded Ti-wook of a question he'd once asked Hai-ran, seeking to understand her unwavering drive. She had replied with unwavering conviction to pursue social justice. Past, present, and future, her reporting adhered to this principle. But after returning with Kevin Lee, Hai-ran's life took a sharp turn for the worse, all because of a small brooch. Ti-wook returned home, packed his bags, and planned to stay at his law office. He couldn't bear to spend another moment with his seemingly two-faced wife. It turned out that, before leaving the previous evening, Kevin Lee had sought out Tae-wook and returned Hai-ran's brooch. He'd said arrogantly, "She dropped it while we were together. Neither of us was thinking clearly at the time. Give it back to her for me." This seemingly damning evidence was impossible for Tae-wook to ignore. The couple already struggled with communication, keeping their feelings bottled up. Now, misunderstanding festered between them. Could Hai-ran protect her family as fiercely as she protected her work? As soon as her husband left, Hai-ran drove to a nearby payphone and called Kevin, confronting him about his scheme. She threatened, "If you continue these despicable tactics against my husband and those around me, you will pay the price." After delivering her warning, Hai-ran fled, consumed by anxiety. She tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. The brooch incident had her deeply worried. Tae-wook's attitude towards her had completely shifted. If the Blue House discovered their marital problems, her chances of becoming their spokesperson would vanish. Determined to maintain the facade of a happy marriage, Hai-ran prepared breakfast and took it to Tae-wook's office, but he refused to play along. Upon seeing her, he turned and walked away. Hai-ran then noticed a file on her husband's desk. After speaking with his assistant, she learned it concerned a wage dispute at Hung In Steel, a powerful corporation that had been causing Tae-wook considerable headaches. Back at her own office, Hai-ran researched the company and discovered similar news stories had been suppressed in the past. Just as they were about to air, negotiations would miraculously succeed, and the stories would be killed. This time, however, they had met their match. Hai-ran decided to speak out on behalf of the desperate workers. She did this not only to help Tae-wook win this difficult case, but also because it aligned with her lifelong commitment to social justice. Her move was a calculated risk, aiming to achieve two goals at once. After the story aired, public outcry condemned Hung In Steel. Kevin Lee was also implicated, as he was the company's spokesperson. Unbelievably, Jae-won, now relegated to a local position, was having a clandestine affair with Kevin Lee. They had upgraded their rendezvous location from a cramped car to a luxurious hotel room. Meanwhile, Hai-ran was on her way to apologize to her director for airing the Hung In Steel story. To her surprise, upon arrival, she witnessed her director shaking hands with a Blue House official. She was eager to know what had been discussed. Normally, the director's anger would have serious consequences. However, this time, he had little choice but to say, "Hai-ran is both audacious and arrogant, but her pursuit of justice is undeniably commendable." Hai-ran simply smiled and expressed her gratitude for the director's support. But her troubles were far from over. Kevin Lee was about to make his move. As she went to retrieve her car, she received photos of Kevin Lee entering her hotel room. She was at a loss. If these photos were released, all her hard work would be for nothing. She could even lose her prime-time anchor position. Hai-ran decided to confront Kevin Lee, determined to understand his game. As Kevin Lee left the hotel, Jae-won, trailing behind him, received a call from his wife. It seemed she had discovered their affair. Hai-ran then arrived at a dimly lit parking garage to meet Kevin. She didn't realize she was walking into his trap. Tae-wook, watching from afar, saw Kevin Lee get into Hai-ran's car. He recalled their past conversations. "You'll only hurt me. I accept that. I'm confident I can handle the consequences of my love." Now, Tae-wook's heart was as cold as the weather. He had lost all faith in their love. Upon meeting, Kevin Lee asked Hai-ran, "Do you love your current husband?" Hai-ran thought to herself that Tae-wook was the first man to love her so completely. But facing her ex-lover, who held her fate in his hands, she couldn't admit it. Taking a step back, she countered, "What about you? Do you love me?" "I used to." "Do you think I believe you? Just like you said, we only lacked a marriage certificate. We were practically husband and wife." Kevin Lee then slowly moved closer to Hai-ran. The proximity left little doubt about his intentions. He said, "If you say that's true, then you need to prove it." Meanwhile, Yoon-ju repeatedly called her husband but received no answer. Suspecting an affair between her husband and Jae-won, she immediately called Jae-won to arrange a meeting. Jae-won was surprised to hear Yoon-ju say, "You're not the first woman Kevin Lee has toyed with." Yoon-ju asked bluntly, "How much money do you need to cut ties with Kevin?" It appeared Yoon-ju was well aware of her husband's philandering nature. Using money to solve the problem wasn't a new tactic. But Yoon-ju was then shocked by Jae-won's words, "Are you planning to deal with Go Hae-ran the same way?" "You probably already know. Kevin Lee is seeing both me and Hae-ran." Meanwhile, Hae-ran frantically wiped her mouth as she drove. Something terrible had clearly transpired between her and Kevin Lee. Suddenly, Yoon-ju called. Her words nearly caused Hae-ran to crash. "Hae-ran, is it true? What did you say? Did you sleep with my husband?" The shock sent Hae-ran's car careening into a guardrail. Thankfully, it came to a stop without serious damage. Hae-ran then went to a coffee shop, sat down, and pulled out the photos Kevin Lee was using to blackmail her. She also revealed Jae-won's plot to use Kevin Lee to ruin her. Hae-ran knew Yoon-ju believed her. Yoon-ju couldn't believe her husband was capable of such shocking acts. Overwhelmed, Yoon-ju ran to the restroom to vomit. She was pregnant with Kevin Lee's child. For Yoon-ju's sake, and to prevent further harm, Hae-ran suggested Yoon-ju and her husband return to the US and pretend nothing had happened. But things weren't that simple. The next day, the regular morning news anchor called in sick, and Hae-ran filled in. Just moments before going on air, breaking news arrived. The news shook even the normally composed Hae-ran. As the broadcast began, she was still in a state of shock. The director's frantic cues finally brought her back to focus. The breaking news: a world-renowned golfer had died in a car accident. The real shock, however, was that the prime suspect in the case was Hae-ran. She was immediately summoned to the police station for questioning. Kevin, the world gold medalist, had tragically died in a traffic accident. While it appeared to be an ordinary accident, a single lapel pin found at the scene implicated Korea's top news anchor, Hae-ran, in the potential murder. Despite being called in for questioning, Hae-ran maintained her signature confidence and commanding presence. Even the two officers who greeted her were taken aback by her aura. Inside the interrogation room, she remained in control, her demeanor haughty as she demanded that Detective Kang wrap up the interview within 30 minutes due to her upcoming live broadcast. Detective Kang immediately produced a photograph, demanding an explanation for why Hae-ran's lapel pin, frequently seen on her live broadcasts, was found at the accident scene. This was the primary reason she was considered a prime suspect. Just as Detective Kang began to pressure her with accusatory questioning, Tae-wook, her lawyer, arrived and put a stop to what he deemed an unlawful interrogation. The situation outside the police station was far from ideal, with a throng of reporters already gathered. Tae-wook informed Hae-ran that while she was officially being questioned as a witness, the police were actively searching for evidence to prove she wasn't at the scene. To avoid further complications, Tae-wook suggested Hae-ran use the back exit. However, knowing her innocence, she refused to sneak away. Despite the potential for a media frenzy, she confidently strode out the front door, facing the public with her characteristic poise. With the unwavering self-assurance of a seasoned anchor, she addressed the clamoring reporters, rebuking their irresponsible reporting. She criticized their premature conclusions, arguing that before the cause of death was determined, such skewed reporting not only damaged her reputation but also eroded public trust in the media. "Do you even have the integrity of journalists?" she challenged. Her words left the reporters visibly ashamed. Hae-ran continued her confident stride, leaving the police station under the glare of the cameras. The primetime anchor of JBC being suspected of murder put immense pressure on the station director. He had no choice but to temporarily suspend Hae-ran, replacing her with a newcomer while she awaited further instruction from senior management. Despite this swift action, the ratings for the 9am news plummeted. The next day, the chairman and vice chairman of JBC held an emergency meeting. They criticized the director for his lack of a contingency plan and demanded a solution to restore the ratings within 24 hours. The news chief nervously suggested bringing back Han Jae-won from a local affiliate. However, the director already had a plan. Under immense pressure, he took a calculated risk, deciding to keep Go Hae-ran as the primetime anchor. Hong, the news chief, was bewildered. Putting someone suspected of murder back on air could further damage the ratings and even lead to a boycott. They'd be completely sunk. But the director had unwavering faith in Hai Ran's abilities. On her first broadcast since the incident, Hai Ran apologized to the public and addressed the accusations head-on. She clarified that she was cooperating with the police, not under investigation, emphasizing the significant difference between the two. With unwavering conviction, she declared, "I ask everyone to refrain from further speculation and commentary. Until the truth is revealed, I will continue to fulfill my duties as your primetime anchor." On this side, when the director saw the unprecedentedly high viewership ratings, he could only click his tongue in admiration. Only Hai Ran could pull this off. After the program ended, her colleagues were all in awe of Hai Ran's composure. They looked at her with admiration. Even her husband, though still harboring resentment over Hai Ran abandoning their child, genuinely opened up to her for the first time. Not only did he praise her excellent work, but he also apologized for not trusting her. Unexpectedly, at this moment, he expressed his desire to protect her. "But you should learn to rely on me." Not just that, even her father-in-law, who worked in the judicial system and had previously looked down on her, started to accept Hai Ran. This was a mudslinging battle. The truth fundamentally didn't matter. What mattered was making others perceive it as the truth. That was the key to victory. Outside, public opinion was buzzing. At the moment when the situation was most unfavorable for Hai Ran, somewhere in prison, a man wearing a baseball cap was slowly walking out of the prison gates. Meanwhile, not wanting her family to be implicated, Hai Ran's mother-in-law angrily demanded that her son immediately cut ties with Hai Ran. But at this moment, he paid no attention to his mother's words, as someone was pushing his limits. Two men at the next table were chattering incessantly, right in front of everyone, discussing the unusual relationship between Hai Ran and Kevin. Their tone and words were filled with disrespect towards Hai Ran. Taewook couldn't tolerate it any longer. He stood up, rushed over, and punched one of the men, sending him sprawling to the floor. Then, he took out his business card, placed it on the table, and told the two men, "If you're not satisfied, you can sue me anytime." Mrs. Kim was astonished by her son's violent actions. Taewook also made his stance clear. "Hai Ran is my wife. Even if outsiders point fingers and call her a bad person, I will definitely stand by her side. Because I am her husband." This was the demeanor of a man willing to take responsibility. Even though he knew Hai Ran's feelings for him weren't love, his determination to protect her had never wavered. As a first step, he accused those online of slandering Hai Ran and damaging her reputation. On the other hand, the results of Kevin's autopsy were also available. The main cause of death was multiple fractures in the head. The forensic conclusion suggested that he might not have been wearing a seatbelt at the time of the accident. After a strong impact, his neck was broken. But what interested the police was that the results showed Kevin's calf muscles were tense. Although this could be caused by slamming on the brakes, there were no skid marks at the scene. Based on these two conclusions, it could be analyzed that Kevin's death was half accident, half deliberate sabotage. The reason Detective Kang suspected foul play was that the bruising on Kevin's wrist wasn't the result of post-accident vascular blockage. Although the autopsy results weren't 100% conclusive, Detective Kang didn't want the case to be closed sloppily. He hoped to get Yoonju's permission to investigate further. But Yoonju refused. She felt that the public outcry was too intense, and she didn't want her husband's death to be further disturbed. Moreover, the person caught in the crossfire was her close friend, Hai Ran. For the sake of her unborn child, Yoonju hoped the police could close the case as soon as possible. But Detective Kang carefully observed and noticed the ring on Yoonju's finger. He immediately felt that Yoonju's desire to quickly close the case wasn't so simple. Sure enough, when reviewing the images from the accident scene, a ring mark on Kevin's finger was also discovered. Both of them had removed their wedding rings. It became very clear that before the accident, their marital relationship wasn't good. Detective Kao immediately checked the security camera footage from in front of Kevin's house. The footage showed that before Kevin's accident, Yoonju got out of Hai Ran's car. After entering the house, she didn't leave, but Yoonju lied to the police, saying she wasn't feeling well that day and stayed home. The camera also recorded that 10 minutes after Yoon-ju returned home, Kevin also arrived. Stranger still, 30 minutes later, he angrily left the house and never returned. Outwardly, they were a happy couple admired by everyone. But was the truth behind closed doors really like that? Recalling Kevin's funeral, Hye-ran and her husband attended to pay their respects. Detective Kang, not content with the case closing as it was, also came to quietly observe, hoping to find more clues. Seeing Go Hye-ran, the current suspect, and the victim's relative, Yoon-ju, embracing each other intimately, Detective Kao was suspicious. In his mind, this scene should have involved hair pulling and slapping. Remembering the ring mark on Yoon-ju's finger earlier, a terrifying speculation arose in his mind. Could Hye-ran and Yoon-ju have conspired to harm Kevin? On the first night after the funeral, Yoon-ju looked at the ring on her finger, recalling the night of Kevin's accident. That day, after Yoon-ju learned that Kevin was using intimate photos to blackmail Hye-ran, he used the excuse that his competition was approaching and he needed to focus on training, wanting to return to the US. But Kevin was tired of the life orchestrated by Yoon-ju. Back then, it was truly because of Yoon-ju's arduous support that Kevin was able to win the championship. Now, if Yoon-ju wanted a better life, he could easily take on more endorsements. After saying that, he took a bottle of soju from the cabinet and took a swig. Yoon-ju didn't want to see Kevin tormenting himself like that and ran to stop him. Unexpectedly, he suddenly flew into a rage, criticizing Yoon-ju for making him feel exhausted. Faced with her husband's coldness, Yoon-ju couldn't contain her anger any longer. She brought up his affair with Han Jae-won. You said you wouldn't make me upset over women anymore. You couldn't even make it a year, and as soon as you returned to Korea, you were involved with another woman. Han Jae-won is one thing. She's young and beautiful. There might be moments you're infatuated. But how could you do that to Hye-ran? Hye-ran is my friend. Just then, Kevin received a phone call and had to leave. Yoon-ju took off her wedding ring, hoping that ending their relationship would stop Kevin from leaving. Unexpectedly, he didn't say a word, took off his own ring, and coldly left the house, and that departure was his last. Yoon-ju was completely devastated. This was the man she had painstakingly supported for the past 10 years. At that moment, the ring fell and rolled under the sofa. That's why he wasn't wearing a ring when she went to identify his body. Back in the present, she looked at the ring on her finger, thinking, a man like that, even if he died, it's no great loss. So she began to clear out all the things related to Kevin. On the second floor, there were even photos of them together, which she put in a garbage bag, preparing to throw them away. Downstairs, as she was about to put away the jacket he had worn that day, a memory card suddenly fell to the floor. And this memory card was the very thing Hye-ran and the police couldn't find. It could prove that Hye-ran didn't assault Kevin, but it would also cause the relationship between the two close friends to begin to fall apart. From then on, this very memory card would turn them into rivals. After going through this, I finally understand what friendship truly means. Sadly, I learned it from you. Right then, Hye-ran's husband suddenly appeared. It turned out Yoon-ju had invited him as well. Hye-ran was astonished, looking at her friend, a face both familiar and foreign. A sudden sense of foreboding washed over her. Currently, the cause of Kevin's death is attributed to drunk driving, compounded by false rumors surrounding Hye-ran. The steel company Kevin represented, citing damage to their image, is demanding Yoon-ju pay 3 times the contract amount in compensation. Yoon-ju hopes Tae-wook can act as her lawyer. Tae-wook initially intended to refuse Yoon-ju, claiming it wasn't his area of expertise. Unexpectedly, Hye-ran spoke up, also hoping he would help Yoon-ju. At that moment, Yoon-ju's eyes seemed to hold a deeper meaning. Since his wife had spoken, he couldn't refuse. Tae-wook handed Yoon-ju his business card, telling her to bring the contract next time. On their way home, Tae-wook, confused, asked Hye-ran why she wanted him to represent Yoon-ju. Hye-ran explained that the case would inevitably involve her name. Even more than Tae-wook, she didn't want others hearing bad rumors about herself. As they were leaving, Yoon-ju, knowing Hye-ran had to go to the broadcasting company, deliberately asked which subway line she took. This left Tae-wook with no choice but to offer Yoon-ju a ride. Watching Yoon-ju's slightly odd expression, Hye-ran felt increasingly uneasy. Later, Tae-wook safely delivered Yoon-ju home. Unexpectedly, Yoon-ju, without hesitation, invited him to stay for dinner. Tae-wook, not being good at refusing, coupled with Yoon-ju's insistence, using the contract discussion as an excuse, ultimately agreed. Left with no other option, he first texted Hai-ran to inform her, then followed Yoon-ju inside. Meanwhile, Hai-ran felt a surge of resentment. Every day she lived under immense pressure, utterly exhausted. But today, something even more draining had occurred. Hai-ran went to work as usual, sitting in her car, trying to compose herself. Looking at the dashcam footage, she recalled that day, how she had lied to gain leverage over Kevin. In contrast, Tae-wook was constantly running around for her case. She felt incredibly guilty towards her husband. Just then, she received an anonymous text message. "You killed Kevin. You're a murderer." Hai-ran cursed under her breath. Where did this crazy person come from? Unexpectedly, the person continued to send messages, claiming to have evidence proving she was the killer. At the same time, in the director's office, the vice president, reviewing the 9M News ratings, had to acknowledge Hai-ran's talent. But he also warned the director about the risk of Hai-ran being a murder suspect, demanding her immediate replacement. The director initially wanted to defend Hai-ran, but upon receiving the same anonymous messages she had, he fell into deep thought. He then went to Hai-ran to ask her about the truth. However, someone constantly bombarded with threatening messages like Hai-ran found this rather commonplace. She hoped the director wouldn't change his decision because of it. But the director couldn't face the situation with her same nonchalance. As the person in charge of the broadcasting station, he had to make the least flawed decisions possible. And the first step was to bring Han Jae-won back from the local station. At this point, Hai-ran sensed an unprecedented danger. Now, all she could do was sit at home, drowning her sorrows in alcohol, then confiding her worries to her husband. From this, it's clear that their relationship is no longer as cold and distant as before. At that moment, Tae-wook pulled out an invitation and said, "This is a party for alumni of the Korea Law School. Attorney Kang In-han, a prominent figure in the legal field, is the host. Notably, he's also a close friend of the vice president of JBC Broadcasting." Tae-wook wanted Hai-ran to accompany him. Even if it meant bowing and scraping, he would protect her prime-time anchor position. But that was just Tae-wook being humble. Even lawyers treated him with deference. His father was a former high-ranking official in the Korean Ministry of Justice. After considering it, she ultimately decided to tell her husband she wouldn't go. She didn't want him to compromise his principles for her career. But Tae-wook saw it differently. He believed that if he couldn't even protect his own wife, then upholding those principles was meaningless. "I won't let anyone bully you. I won't let anyone hurt you. No matter what happens, I'll keep my promise to you." The next day, Tae-wook took his wife to the party, attended by practically the entire legal community. Everyone looked at her with scrutinizing eyes. The renowned attorney Kang, upon seeing him, greeted him warmly. "Tae-wook, long time no see. You were talking about becoming a lawyer before, and now it's been 5 years since you left the Ministry of Justice, hasn't it?" Responding to attorney Kang's greeting, Tae-wook simply smiled and introduced his wife. "Hai-ran, this is my wife. This is Mr. Kang In-han, a representative of the Ministry of Justice. I'm Go Hai-ran. It's a pleasure to meet you." After the introductions, Mr. Kang, understanding Tae-wook's purpose, immediately ushered him into the Golden Door. This was a space created for and used exclusively by alumni of the Judicial Research and Training Institute. It was also the foundation of an unspoken yet clearly existent, shadowy organization within the Korean judicial and media landscape. Inside, Mr. Kang introduced Tae-wook to the others present. The man sitting before them was a former Supreme Court Justice, a former senior Blue House official, and a current member of the National Assembly. Upon hearing that Tae-wook was just a small-time lawyer, his expression was one of disdain. But when Mr. Kang mentioned that he was the son of Chief Justice Ka, the man immediately stood up and shook his hand. Tae-wook's father, it turned out, was the founder of this Golden Door Club. The vice president of JBC Broadcasting, sitting nearby, also greeted him enthusiastically. "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you." After exchanging pleasantries, Tae-wook immediately stated his reason for being there. However, the vice president showed no deference. "This isn't the place for personal favors." Since the vice president was being unreasonable, Tae-wook dropped all pretense of politeness. He resorted to his trump card. Years ago, the vice president's son had been arrested for drug trafficking. He had gone to great lengths to get his son acquitted, and the prosecutor in charge of the case had been none other than Tae-wook. He emphasized, "This isn't a request. I'm here to ask you a favor. Please protect anchorwoman Go Hae-ran." The vice president's face paled. His arrogance vanished. Tae-wook then asked Mr. Kang to use his influence within the prosecutor's office to ensure Hae-ran wouldn't be indicted, citing insufficient evidence, effectively making the whole incident disappear. Unfortunately, their conversation was overheard by prosecutor Woo Hyun. Had Tae-wook not been there, Woo Hyun would have been the one chosen to enter the Golden Door. But with Tae-wook's appearance, his dreams went up in smoke, giving rise to a burning resentment. Even more shockingly, he would become the catalyst that thrust Hae-ran into danger. At the same time, Hae-ran, outside, received a threatening message. Looking around, she suddenly saw a masked man running upstairs. Hae-ran quickly gave chase. Taking advantage of a bend in the staircase, she got a clear look at the man's face. It was Byung-hee, Kevin Lee's manager. Through a reporter friend, Hae-ran learned detailed information about the man. He was 3 months behind on his sister's hospital bills, an alcoholic, heavily in debt to loan sharks, and had just been released from prison for embezzlement. The scoundrel's motive for threatening Hae-ran was clear. Hae-ran immediately went to the hospital where his sister, Baek Dong-hae, was being treated and waited to meet him. Confident she wouldn't fall into his trap, she assumed his supposed evidence was fabricated to extort money for his sister's medical expenses. She warned him that if he continued, she would report him to the police. Unexpectedly, Baek Dong-hae wasn't intimidated. He had compromising photos of her and Kevin Lee in Thailand. He threatened, "If you dare call the police, I will release these photos and drag you down with me." Outwardly, Hae-ran maintained her composure, but inside, she was deeply worried. She truly feared the photos being leaked. Knowing his weak spot was his sister, she offered, "I'll help you pay the 3 months of outstanding hospital bills." Her ultimate goal, however, was to retrieve the photos. Baek Dong-hae wasn't a fool. He immediately questioned, "Are you trying to make a deal with me?" Hae-ran confidently replied, "This is your chance. I'm giving you the opportunity to be a good person in your sister's eyes." Finally, for his sister's sake, Baek Dong-hae accepted the deal. He handed over the memory card containing the photos to Hae-ran. The next day, at the appointed time, the person who showed up wasn't Byung-hee, but someone far more surprising. The man in black with a hat covering his face was Myung-woo. He had served 19 years in prison for her. Detective Kang and his partner, observing from a distance, were baffled by the turn of events and left empty-handed. Hae-ran returned to the TV station and immediately went to the restroom to check the contents of the memory card. After confirming that they were indeed the photos Byung-hee had taken in Thailand, she promptly flushed the card down the toilet. The threats, the accusations of betrayal, and her harrowing past were all washed away. Afterwards, Hae-ran called the prison where Myung-woo had been incarcerated to confirm his release. Upon receiving confirmation, memories from the past flooded back. Hae-ran had a tragic childhood. She grew up poor, living with her mother. Her sole motivation for attending university was to escape poverty. However, her mother's thinking was too conservative. She believed higher education was useless for girls and refused to pay her tuition. Left with no other choice, Hae-ran approached the owner of a gold shop for a loan. Once she had her degree, she planned to repay him with interest. The gold shop owner readily agreed, telling her to meet him at 9 p.m. Naive at the time, Hae-ran genuinely believed she had found a kind soul. But that night, the owner's true intentions became clear. He had lured her there, captivated by her beauty. After struggling, she managed to escape. Just then, Myung-woo arrived. Myung-woo had always had a crush on Hae-ran. Seeing her running out, frightened and distraught, he immediately understood what had happened. Hae-ran tried to explain, "It's not what you think. Nothing happened." But Myung-woo, enraged and refusing to listen, rushed inside to confront the gold shop owner. Tragically, he accidentally killed him. As a result, Myung-woo was sentenced to 19 years in prison. That evening, upon returning home, Hai Ran heard a familiar melody coming from Ti-wook's room. She pushed the door open, her face melancholic. "What's this?" she asked. It turned out she had once told Ti-wook she liked that particular piece of music. Unbeknownst to Ti-wook, the music he thought she enjoyed was the same music playing the night she was almost assaulted. It was a memory she desperately wanted to suppress. Fear rising within her, she became distraught, simply telling him, "Don't play this music in the house again." On one side, Yoonju was listening to the same music, appearing to enjoy it, showing no signs of a recently widowed woman. But it was all part of her revenge plan, because only Hai Ran's suffering could bring her joy. The next day, Ti-wook went to the Steel Corporation to negotiate Yoonju's tripled compensation lawsuit. Unexpectedly, Yoonju had been waiting there for a long time. Ti-wook found it odd since Yoonju's presence wasn't necessary. In the elevator, gossiping employees were discussing Kevin and Hai Ran's alleged affair, even mocking the deceased. It was unclear whether Yoonju couldn't bear hearing her husband spoken of that way, or if she wanted to perform her grief for Ti-wook's benefit. She suddenly confronted them, arguing fiercely. Afterwards, she sobbed dramatically, eliciting sympathy from onlookers. Later, Ti-wook brought Yoonju to his office. Yoonju couldn't understand how he could remain calm after hearing others slander his wife. Ti-wook said that regardless of whether the rumors were true or false, he was the one who had wronged Hai Ran. Of course, Ti-wook still believed Hai Ran hadn't betrayed him. Yoonju admired Hai Ran for having such a forgiving and understanding husband. But now, she was determined to destroy Hai Ran, and the first step was to shatter Ti-wook's trust in his wife. She asked Ti-wook with a determined gaze, "If there's evidence proving Kevin and Hai Ran's relationship is real, Ti-wook, will you still be so confident in your wife?" Without waiting for his answer, she angrily stormed off, leaving Ti-wook stunned. Her resolute expression planted a seed of doubt in his mind, seemingly shaking his conviction. Meanwhile, Hai Ran's rival, Jae-won, had been transferred back from the local station. Her colleagues greeted her return with warm enthusiasm. Witnessing this, Jae-won seemed to have made a decision. After much effort, Hai Ran was finally chosen as the Blue House spokesperson. She was asked to quickly resolve any outstanding issues to prepare for the role. Upon receiving the news, Hai Ran called her husband to share the good news and thank him for his support. Ti-wook went to a flower shop to buy his wife a celebratory bouquet. Unexpectedly, he received a call from Yoonju on the way. However, the call ended as soon as he answered. Unable to reach him, Yoonju contacted Detective Kang, claiming she had something to discuss. Unable to reach Yoonju, Ti-wook went to her house. He saw her rushing out and, not understanding the situation, decided to go upstairs. Unexpectedly, he saw something he shouldn't have. Meanwhile, Hai Ran informed Director Kang about her appointment as the Blue House spokesperson. He asked, "Are you sure you want to go there?" Director Kang felt the position wasn't suitable for her, but Hai Ran had made her choice. She knew she wouldn't advance if she stayed, relegated to delivering insignificant news reports and collecting a meager salary. She was clearly not that kind of person. She had already recommended a replacement and planned to submit her resignation the following week. Director Kang, having watched her career from the beginning, understood her completely. He hoped she could leave quietly. But Hai Ran had other plans. It turned out that after Han Jae-won's return, she realized her position was no longer secure. So, instead of their previous rivalry, she supported Han Jae-won as her replacement, encouraging her to become a righteous broadcaster. They decided to join forces, planning to co-broadcast a report exposing the crimes of the Hone in Steel Corporation, something Hai Ran hadn't been able to accomplish before. After leaving the director's office, a colleague informed her that someone was looking for her. Opening the door, she was surprised to find Yoonju. Yoonju said she knew about the affair between her husband and Hai Ran. Yoonju blamed Hai Ran for destroying her happiness. She gave Hai Ran two choices. 1. Give the memory card to Ti-wook. This would mean Hai Ran would lose a good husband. 2. Delete the recording. This would make Hai Ran a suspect in the case. Such a strong woman, but faced with these two choices, she felt immense pain. Hai Ran thought that even if she knelt down and apologized to Yoonju now, it wouldn't mean anything. she would apologize to Yoonju, but at a different time. Outside, she collapsed in anguish. Perhaps she was still trying to protect her small shred of self-respect. Meanwhile, the video of his wife with another man had shattered Tae-wook's trust completely. The feeling of betrayal left him reeling. Jae-won, after obtaining evidence of Hone in Steel Corporation's crimes, wanted to give it to Hai-ran. But before she could, Director Jang called her in. Director Jang wanted to prevent them from broadcasting the news. Luckily, just as he was about to grab the documents, Hai-ran appeared and snatched them back. Only she would dare to snatch something from the director like that. Hai-ran told Han Jae-won to quickly arrange for the news to be aired. The director could only stand powerless against this determined and strong woman. The news was quickly broadcast. She and Han Jae-won exposed all of Hone in Steel Corporation's crimes, causing a public outcry. The concrete evidence was irrefutable. Hai-ran's unexpected move sent Hone in reeling. They had successfully exposed the Steel Corporation's crimes to the entire nation. This was something very few people dared to do. The broadcast was a success. Everyone celebrated together, cracking open beers. Suddenly, Detective Kang appeared, bringing people with him to arrest her. The scene stunned everyone. However, at this moment, after seeing the video, Tae-wook couldn't contain his emotions. He turned to alcohol, drinking one glass after another. Hai-ran tried to call him, but Tae-wook rejected the call. The two just missed each other. Upon hearing the news of Hai-ran's emergency arrest, Tae-wook's manager hurriedly called him. But Tae-wook was already drunk, oblivious to the world. The next morning, Tae-wook woke up startled to find people collecting his wife's belongings. Calling his assistant, he learned that his wife had been arrested the previous night. Filled with self-blame, Tae-wook rushed to the office to find out more. At the same time, the company was being searched for all documents related to Hai-ran. Seeing this, Jae-won quickly texted Hai-ran's assistant, telling him to immediately copy the data regarding the Kang Hee construction case. Thanks to Jae-won's help, he managed to copy the data before it fell into the wrong hands. However, Director Jang discovered this and confiscated the copy. Tae-wook went to see Byung-woo Hyun, wanting to ask for his help. But of course, it was impossible. He flatly refused, not forgetting to mock him. At this point, Hai-ran's close friend came to find Tae-wook, saying that Hai-ran had been framed. Song-yi told Tae-wook about the illegal bidding of Kang Hee Construction and Hone in Steel supplying substandard materials. Barely an hour after the news aired, Hai-ran was arrested. After that, the prosecutor sent people to collect all related documents and videos. Tae-wook didn't understand. It was just a news report. But Song-yi explained that she herself was the witness who had been kicked out of the newsroom years ago. Meanwhile, Yoonju was invited by Byung-woo Hyun to provide information. It seemed he was preparing another scheme. Yoonju said that the last person to call her husband was Go Hai-ran. But Detective Kang's investigation revealed that the last call to Kevin's phone was from an internal line at the JBC newsroom. Sensing something was amiss, Detective Kang immediately ordered his subordinates to investigate further. On one side, Tae-wook still hadn't appeared as Hai-ran's lawyer, so a temporary attorney was standing in. This bespectacled lawyer, upon entering, informed her about the new candidate for the Blue House spokesperson position. He then implied she should give up and settle into the role of a housewife. His condescending attitude towards women disgusted the viewers. Detective Kang wondered why his wife had been arrested, but Tae-wook was still nowhere to be seen. His subordinate, however, found this understandable, remarking that if they had a wife like her, they wouldn't show up either. Meanwhile, Woo Hyun entered Hai-ran's cell to question her, but she asserted he had no evidence to arrest her, forcing him to leave empty-handed. Shortly after, Tae-wook's assistant arrived, informing her that her husband was running around trying to clear up the case. Due to the time crunch, Tae-wook had asked his assistant to relay a message to Hai-ran that today's news broadcast hadn't covered the Kang Hee construction bidding issue. He specifically told the assistant to say, "Just tell her that. Hai-ran will understand." Hai-ran seemed to have figured something out. She immediately asked the assistant to relay a message to Han at JBC. At a high-end restaurant, a Kang-run office gathering was taking place. It appeared their plans had changed. This time, as hoped, Byung-woo Hyun was the chosen one. It turned out he had made significant contributions to the successful bid. Consequently, Tae-wook was kicked out of the running, paving the way for Byung-woo Hyun to take the coveted position. He was clearly not someone to be trifled with. Tae-wook arrived, but the party was over. Through Tae-wook's assistant, Han Jae-won received the message. Confused, she sought out Director Jang. Upon hearing the message, Director Jang immediately understood its meaning and called an urgent meeting. He announced that today's headline would be about Go Hai-ran. He urged everyone to investigate the facts of the case and the reason for the emergency arrest. With only 2 hours left before the broadcast, he demanded that they interview the prosecutor and the lawyer, ensuring the report was accurate and without embellishment. The news report aired quickly, accusing the police of abusing their power to unlawfully arrest a suspect. Watching the broadcast, Hai-ran immediately went to find the memory card. She wanted to release the video. To her shock, the video had been deleted. Because the data had been overwritten 5 times, it was unrecoverable. It turned out that after Tae-wook watched the video that day, he was heartbroken and deleted it. Furious, Yoon-ju rushed to find Tae-wook, slapping him across the face without hesitation. However, Tae-wook calmly replied, "I didn't see anything. That day, your husband and my wife never met." His words left Yoon-ju speechless. She never expected things to turn out this way. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, her eyes filled with pain. "You can delete the video, but I'm still here. I'll always remember that image. And that's the truth." After 48 hours in custody, Hai-ran was finally released on bail. She walked out of the detention center, head held high, proudly passing by Byung-woo Hyun. Just then, her close friend called, praising her husband. "Your husband is amazing. He made everyone understand the injustice you suffered." Hai-ran froze. She hadn't expected Tae-wook to take her side, to publicly oppose the prosecution for her. She descended the stairs and was surprised to see Tae-wook waiting for her. At that moment, the feeling of being moved overshadowed the injustice she had endured. Because she had always considered herself alone. But it turned out he was still here. Tae-wook had been by her side all along. He simply said, "Let's go." Without waiting for her response, he embraced her, and they walked out together into the flashing lights of countless cameras. On the way home, Yoon-ju unconsciously watched couples showing affection on the street, then glanced at the news report announcing Hai-ran's release. A sense of helplessness she couldn't articulate welled up inside her. Suddenly, Yoon-ju felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. The pain intensified. She was quickly rushed to the hospital. But unexpectedly, the baby was gone. After a good night's sleep, Hai-ran woke up, chose an outfit, and headed to the broadcasting station. Her colleagues were surprised to see her. Hai-ran went straight to the director's office. She expressed her determination to fight this battle to the end, but the director urged her to calmly consider the situation. He believed that this matter involved the prosecution, corporations, public opinion, and even figures in the legal profession. All of them were powerful enemies. Any mistake, and she would face more than just an emergency arrest warrant. However, Hai-ran stated that she had used her 48 hours in detention to think this through, and she was determined to expose their corruption. The director could only look on helplessly. Her close friend found out and tried to dissuade her, saying it was too dangerous. But Hai-ran had already made up her mind. Her determination outweighed everyone's advice, and she said she didn't want her friend's past efforts to be in vain. As it turned out, Song-yi, her friend, had been Hai-ran's senior in the industry years ago. But because she stubbornly insisted on exposing the truth, powerful figures had pushed her out of her job. Although she persisted, she was eventually assigned to clean the swimming pool that the broadcasting station managed. Ultimately, she couldn't take it anymore and left with her severance pay. Fortunately, she had managed to escape with her life and transferred to the newsroom where Hai-ran worked. Back then, Hai-ran, as a new employee, hadn't been able to speak out in order to protect her career. This time, she was determined to fight for justice, for Hai-ran to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Byun was reprimanded by his superiors for issuing an emergency arrest warrant for Hai-ran without finding any incriminating evidence. This had even caused the public to lose faith in the prosecution. He angrily said, If there isn't any evidence, then create it. We absolutely have to make this case disappear. Back at the company, Hai Ran, along with Han Jae-won and Kai Seok, were putting a plan together. They were determined to expose Young-di Han's dirtiness to the public. Thanks to information from her friend, Hai Ran knew that he only cared about money and women, and that he had recently been frequenting a certain hotel and directly soliciting prostitutes there. With this information, the three of them began to act. However, Hai Ran called the two of them back, saying that their opponent this time was Young-di Han. Even if they succeeded this time, there would definitely be problems later on. Both of them could face difficulties, so if they didn't want to, they could choose to back out. But Han Jae-won said that this was the first project she was in charge of. She was determined to protect it and not let anyone take it away from her. Team leader Young saw Hai Ran talking and was about to eavesdrop when director Jang came out and stopped him, ordering him to quickly revise the script. Kai Seok and the police quickly arrived in front of the hotel. After talking to the manager, he quickly denied any possibility of prostitution occurring on the premises. The police stated that they had received a tip from a citizen and needed to investigate, wanting to go upstairs and inspect the rooms. The manager had no choice but to ask the two officers to wait while he called his boss to inform him. At that moment, Hai Ran's car was spotted by their people. Jae-won had just arrived when she immediately received a threatening call from the vice president, demanding that she return immediately or she would face the consequences. Under the intense threats, Jae-won began to waver, but remembering Hai Ran's words to her before leaving, she made up her mind. She wouldn't let herself be trampled on. When Kai Seok arrived with the police, they found no one. The police searched the premises, but the room was devoid of any traces. Suddenly, the hotel manager spotted Kai Seok and immediately questioned his identity and presence. Hai Ran, on the other end of the line, sensed something amiss. He identified himself as a reporter, there to cooperate with the police, but the hotel manager insisted that he lacked official documentation for an interview and their consent, therefore demanding his departure. At this point, Han Jae-won hadn't yet arrived. As Hai Ran contemplated taking her place to go live on air, she finally showed up. Given that Young-di Han remained concealed within a room, a comprehensive search of all rooms was unfeasible. But Hai Ran was not one to concede defeat. She approached the fire alarm, smashing it open with a decisive strike, causing it to blare loudly. Her action was precise, without any superfluous movement. The hotel patrons hastily gathered their belongings and fled. Di-han was no exception, hurriedly grabbing his pants and escaping with the prostitute. This scene was meticulously captured by the hidden camera concealed within Jae-won's handbag. Kai Seok and the police arrived simultaneously. The manager, witnessing the scene, urged Di-han to retreat to his room, but he remained arrogantly defiant, deeming the cops and reporters as insignificant adversaries. He even directly threatened to report them to their superiors. He presumed that even if they managed to record anything, they would be unable to publish it, but he was sorely mistaken. Han Jae-won signaled to Kai Seok, and the broadcast commenced immediately. The news immediately garnered over 3 million viewers, and the viewers went wild, sharing the report. Councilman Young-di Han engaged in prostitution with a minor in hotel. Everyone was stunned by the news. Witnessing their success, director Jang lauded them with praise. He decided to broadcast the news during prime time. The vice president questioned the veracity of his decision. Unexpectedly, he said, "Going up against the major players once in a while isn't a bad thing. Especially at a time like this, the last thing you should do is to shield those powers." It turns out he had always wanted to resist these forces. Passing by, Hai Ran deliberately gave a thumbs up. Hai Ran was deeply touched. On her way home, she was taken by surprise when Tae-wook was already waiting for her there. As it turned out, Tae-wook was worried that Hai Ran would be in danger after this ordeal, so he wanted to come and pick her up. Just as the two were about to head out for dinner, Yoon-ju suddenly appeared. Hai Ran wanted them to finally be able to talk, but Yoon-ju was blinded by hatred at this point. Taking advantage of Hai Ran's inattention, Yoon-ju grabbed a sharp object and lunged towards her. Tae-wook rushed to shield Hai Ran, but fortunately, Myung-woo appeared just in time and stopped Yoon-ju. Looking at the familiar face, it turned out that he was the one who gave Hai Ran the umbrella at the hospital that day. After this incident, Hai-ran's spirits were deflated. The two of them went home together. Tae-wook said that he would file a restraining order tomorrow to keep Yoon-ju away from Hai-ran, but she declined, saying that she did not want to make a big deal out of it. Tae-wook could not understand why his wife was constantly avoiding things. When the topic of Uno and Kevin Lee came up, Hai-ran said that she would not be happy if the topic was brought up, because no matter how hard she tried to explain, people would not choose to believe her. No one cared about her grievances and helplessness. Meanwhile, Han Jae-won was preparing to go home when she ran into Officer Kang, who was already waiting. Officer Kang only found out at this time that Han Jae-won and Kevin Lee were together the night before the incident. To be exact, at the time of reporting on Kang in Ham and H-won in construction. After Kevin Lee answered the phone, he left in a hurry, and she went to see Yoon-ju at this time. At that time, she was very angry. Yoon-ju was curious as to why Officer Kang was always suspicious of Go Hai-ran, when it was clear that Yoon-ju had the most motives for the crime. The next morning, Tae-wook went to find Yoon-ju, gave her a plane ticket, and wanted her to quickly return to the United States. Unexpectedly, he learned something that shocked him deeply. It turned out that when Hai-ran was 18, a young man named Myung-woo had a secret crush on her. Hai-ran, because her mother didn't have the money for her to attend university, searched everywhere for options. Finally, she went to a jewelry store and asked the owner there to lend her money for her studies. She promised she would definitely pay him back. To her surprise, the owner happily agreed and told her to come back at 9 p.m. that night. Hai-ran was incredibly naive at the time and didn't realize that the jewelry store owner had become secretly infatuated with her beauty. He asked her to come at night to lure her inside. Hai-ran struggled to get away. Coincidentally, Myung-woo, who had been searching frantically for Hai-ran, saw the woman he secretly loved exit the jewelry store, her clothes disheveled. Being at such a passionate age, Myung-woo didn't hesitate, despite Hai-ran's desperate pleas, and rushed inside. What was inevitable then happened. Myung-woo was sentenced to 19 years in prison. Hai-ran felt somewhat guilty. If only he had believed her that year, the man wouldn't have gotten away, and he wouldn't have become a criminal. Crestfallen, Hai-ran finished speaking and left, unaware that Tae-wook inside was in immense pain. The following day, as soon as Hai-ran arrived at the TV station, the vice president called her in and expressed his desire for them to be on the same side, proposing that she replace Director Jang's position. This came as a bit of a surprise to Hai-ran, because it seemed as though Director Jang still wanted to play for a bit longer. Her mother-in-law sought Hai-ran out at this point. She couldn't stand having a daughter-in-law like that. She blamed Hai-ran for her husband's appearance on the news broadcasts. She said, "You are a disgrace to this family. You're not only suspected of dropping a case, but you were also taken into emergency custody one night, embarrassing both men. Because of you, Tae-wook gave up so many good law firms to return to being a public defender. And finally, I request that you leave Tae-wook immediately." On the other side, Tae-wook met with Myung-woo, asking him why he had come to see him immediately after being released from prison. Myung-woo expressed, he originally thought his suffering was because of love, but in the end, he realized it was actually because of the self-esteem he lost from not having a promising future. It seemed at that moment that Tae-wook finally understood something. He went to find Hai-ran, and the two shared a passionate kiss after so many years apart. And of course, what followed was marital intimacy. The next day, Yoon-ju received some news. It turned out that Dong Hyeon's sister had passed away. Dong Hyeon apologized to Yoon-ju because he had used the photos of her husband with Hai-ran in Thailand to get money for his sister's medical treatment. Meanwhile, at the TV station, Hai-ran had her position reinstated by the vice president and returned to her old job. She found the vice president and presented him with her court summons, saying she wanted him to have someone from the Kang Jun law firm defend her case and that they absolutely had to win. This was the condition she made in response to the vice president's previous request. Director Jang asked her if she was confident she wouldn't regret this decision. Unexpectedly, Hai-ran said, "I'm not confident, but with my current situation, I can only make this decision." It seemed that the two of them had officially declared war. Tae-wook arrived at the office, only to discover that Byun-woo Hyun was still persistently suing Hai-ran. But this time, she didn't want him to help her anymore. Coming home after an exhausting day, Hai Ran was surprised to find a table set for a dinner party, courtesy of her husband. He told her that she didn't need to look for another lawyer. He would definitely help her. But Hai Ran retorted that she hated her mother. Her mother had been constantly deceived by men, both romantically and financially, spending her entire life waiting for a man who would never return. Hai Ran didn't want to end up like her mother. She had always believed in their marriage because she loved him, but now she wasn't so sure anymore. Unexpectedly, she then said, "Ti-wook, let's break up." He was bewildered. Hai Ran then confessed that it was because she had fallen in love with him. After saying that, she left. A week later, Ti-wook still hadn't returned home. In another twist, just as the accessory presentation was about to take place, a witness appeared, claiming he had seen the crime scene. With only a week left until the trial, Hai Ran was frantic. She called the vice president to ask about the progress of her case, but he just told her to wait. It turned out that the law firm, Kang Jun, was planning to abandon the case. But unexpectedly, Ti-wook appeared, announcing that he was a lawyer dispatched by the Kang Jun law firm. It wasn't just Ti-wook's love for her that was immense, it was also his obsession with fulfilling his promise. Apparently, Ti-wook had learned from Kang Jun about Hai Ran entrusting her case to them, so he volunteered to defend her. Hai Ran initially wanted to refuse Ti-wook's offer to represent her, but Ti-wook argued that he was representing Kang Jun as her defense lawyer since the trial was only 5 days away. He also stated that he was the only one at Kang Jun in charge of the case. Faced with this situation, Hai Ran had no choice but to agree. Ti-wook, wanting to personally defend his wife, had joined the Kang Jun law firm. During a meeting, Hai Ran seemed distracted and was immediately criticized by Director Jang, who demanded that she recompile all the materials from the police station. Kai Seok offered to help, but Director Jang insisted that Hai Ran do it herself. Hai Ran didn't refuse. In the evening, after work, Ti-wook still came to pick her up. They went to a small restaurant, unaware that a car had been following them the whole time. Meanwhile, Yoon-ju couldn't get in touch with Baek Dong-hyun and immediately sensed something was wrong. She had no choice but to seek help from Officer Kang. Because they were still fighting, Hai Ran went home first. Unbeknownst to her, she narrowly avoided Dong-hyun by a split second. While Hai Ran was crossing the street, he tried to stage a traffic accident. Fortunately, Ti-wook arrived just in time, saving her life. Myung-woo had followed Baek Dong-hyun to a convenience store. Upon seeing Myung-woo, he ran away. The two chased each other down an alley. After a fistfight, Baek Dong-hyun was clearly weaker and, taking advantage of Myung-woo's inattention, threw a rock at his head before fleeing. The next day, because Ti-wook had gone to meet Byung-woo-hyun that morning, he had his manager take Hai Ran to work. Director Jang, learning that a witness had suddenly appeared in Hai Ran's case, felt anxious, but Hai Ran had a plan. She intended to use the 70-minute special report to expose all the unconscionable acts committed by the prosecutors and those in power. However, Director Jang believed the prosecution's ultimate goal was to convict her. But even if they didn't convict her, they could still ruin her reputation completely. The more they were humiliated, the more they would make her pay the price. Hai Ran wouldn't back down either. She'd already lost all face. She had nothing left to fear. Director Jang immediately erupted in anger, adamantly disagreeing with the plan. Nevertheless, Hai Ran refused to give up. She was determined to fight to the end. Yeon-young, at that moment, was standing outside and overheard their conversation. Curious, she went to Hai Ran's desk, saw the documents, and reached out to open them. Unexpectedly, Hai Ran returned and caught her. After learning about Hai Ran's plan, she told her husband, Byung-woo-hyun, but he was very confident in himself, thinking Hai Ran's actions would only embarrass her more. Shaking slightly, with some worry, she reminded her husband to be careful. Go Hai Ran was truly a terrifying woman. Byung-woo-hyun said nothing and left. After consulting with Kang and Han, he decided to turn the first trial into a fierce battle. Finally, Ti-wook was waiting for her in the lobby, right on time. They both went to the riverside. Ti-wook expressed his complete faith in her, telling her to confidently entrust everything to him. Dong-hai was watching them from a distance. The next day was the trial. As Ti-wook was getting ready to go to court, He suddenly received a text message saying Hai Ran definitely wouldn't make it to the trial that day. Ti-wook realized something was wrong and immediately called Hai Ran, but there was no answer. Hai Ran later picked up her phone, saw his missed call, and called him back. Ti-wook told her to stay home until he returned. Worried about his wife's safety, he rushed home. But as he was opening the door, Baek Dong-hyeon suddenly attacked his car. At home, Hai Ran had just reached the door when she unexpectedly saw Officer Kang. Suddenly, she received a call from Myung-woo saying Ti-wook was in the hospital, telling her to visit him immediately. Upon hearing this, Hai Ran was stunned. She sped to the hospital like a madwoman, and only breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Ti-wook was unharmed. It turned out that when Dong-hyeon was about to attack Ti-wook, Myung-woo had intervened in time, allowing him to remain unscathed. They went to the courthouse together. The trial began. At that moment, a new witness emerged. This man, named Guman, made a living as a small-scale farmer. After retiring, he testified that on that day, while he was parked near the Bijang-dong construction site to rest, he had inadvertently seen two people arguing. One of them was identified as Kevin Lee, but to their surprise, the other person was a man, not a woman. The witness said he usually woke up naturally early in the morning. By chance, he woke up even earlier that day, so he decided to check on his vegetable garden and happened to witness the scene of the crime. But they were even more shocked when he said there was another woman at the scene. This woman was none other than Go Hai Ran. The statement immediately caused an uproar in the courtroom. Director Jang called Yeon Young into his office, saying they were going to have a special 70-minute news segment about Go Hai Ran, from the best anchor in South Korea to a murderer. He wanted her to embellish the stories behind the scenes through her prosecutor husband. Yeon Young asked him, "Do you really want to eliminate Go Hai Ran at this point?" But Director Jang expressed that this time he was determined not to let Go Hai Ran off the hook. He also emphasized that she had made many mistakes recently that had displeased him greatly, and even hinted that he might replace her as the star anchor. Jae-won and Kai Seok suddenly remembered the witness. Today felt somewhat familiar, and Kai Seok immediately reported this to Director Jang. He was told not to discuss this with anyone and to return to the trial. At this point, Kang Ti-wook, a police officer, was being questioned. He asked why the ratio of murder to accident was 50-50, but Kang Ti-wook was adamant that Go Hai Ran was the perpetrator. He presented evidence of the brooch, noting that Hai Ran was the last person to see the victim. Another reason was their encounter 19 years prior. Finally, it was the defendant's turn to be questioned. Byung-woo Hyun stood up to interrogate, relentlessly probing into her relationship with Kevin Lee before and providing evidence of their meeting. However, all of this evidence, while detrimental to Hai Ran, wasn't enough to convict her. The trial adjourned, and the judge announced that the next hearing would take place in 3 days. Yoon-ju then saw a figure that looked a lot like Myung-woo. She hurriedly chased after him, but as soon as she got outside, she was surrounded by reporters. The vice chairman then called Director Jang. It turned out that he was the one who had provided information to Prosecutor Byeon, allowing him to gain the upper hand in the trial. Director Jang expressed surprise that his testimony had helped the prosecutor. He claimed he was only telling the truth. Meanwhile, Ti-wook began to doubt the veracity of the witness's testimony. After some speculation, Ti-wook suddenly noticed a suspicious point and immediately told manager Mao to investigate. Before leaving, Mao reminded Ti-wook about a traffic ticket. Ti-wook picked it up, and his expression changed. Hai Ran spoke with her best friend, Song-yi. She was shocked that Director Jang was the informant. Hai Ran stated that she would fight to the end. Her friend worried that she would lose everything, and not only would she suffer, but her husband would too. This was also Hai Ran's biggest concern. Police officer Kang came to Ti-wook and said that Baek Dong-hyeon, Kevin Lee's assistant, had disappeared, and the last call made was from the building where Ti-wook's office was located. Hai Ran gave Song-yi a plan and wanted her to confirm these items. Quickly, the second trial arrived. Ti-wook presented images of the viewpoint from the scene. Clearly, at that time, the witness could not have seen the entire scene as he had testified. Under Ti-wook's questioning, the witness started to become flustered, only saying he didn't remember. The more he spoke, the clearer the absurdity of his testimony became. The scene was not only too dark, But there was also snow falling, and the weather was extremely bad. How could he have seen the entire scene so clearly? Under Tae-wook's incisive evidence, Byung-woo Hyun angrily stood up to object, but was stopped by the judge. Tae-wook then pointed out that the witness was the former principal of Daehoon High School, which had previously been the subject of a Go Hye-ran primetime news segment due to suspicions of illegal admissions practices at the private high school. Seeing that his secret was exposed, the witness immediately blamed others, saying he was framed. Tae-wook argued that he was forced to give false testimony out of revenge. The witness refused to admit that Hye-ran had reported false information, and insisted he didn't fabricate his testimony. However, at that moment, Director Jang appeared as a witness, substantiating the relationship between himself and Go Hye-ran. It turned out that years ago, after Go Hye-ran's news report exposed suspicions of illegal admissions at Dongjong High School, he had been fired. His lawyer at the time was from the Kanggun law firm, which understandably raised some eyebrows. Although his lawyer was aggressive, he ultimately lost the case because what anchor Go Hye-ran reported was the truth. Embittered by the loss, he sent a threatening letter to JBC's newsroom, intending to intimidate Go Hye-ran. Unexpectedly, Director Jang had kept that threatening letter. Prosecutor Byun, who wanted to stop him, was overruled by Director Jang. Recalling their previous phone conversation, he decided to stand down. This time, the questioning clearly favored Hye-ran. Byung-woo Hyun went ballistic, accusing Guman of deceiving him. Ultimately, the preliminary trial concluded due to insufficient evidence and a lack of suspicious circumstances. The court declared Go Hye-ran not guilty. A wave of emotion washed over everyone. All the pent-up frustration had been lifted. However, it seemed the matter wasn't entirely settled. At that moment, an unidentified body was found floating in the Han River. Guman, having failed in his testimony, worried he would be sued for perjury. He was in a panic, calling Attorney Kang for help, but Attorney Kang simply told him to do as he'd been told before. At Hye-ran and Tae-wook's home, they enjoyed a romantic evening. This night finally felt like they were a real married couple. The next morning, before leaving, Tae-wook even prepared a sweet breakfast for her. Byung-woo Hyun was called in by his superiors and reprimanded for finding a witness who continued to make the prosecution a laughingstock. It was clear this had really angered them. It was then that he realized the key person leading to this situation was Kang In-han, the head of Kang law firm, the largest in the country, and that he was a mere puppet in his hands, turning the prosecutors of South Korea into a bunch of shameless fools, worse than beat cops. Kang went to see Tae-wook. It turned out the body in the Han River was Baek Dong-hyun. Meanwhile, Hye-ran arrived at work. Because Hye-ran was found not guilty, everyone was happy for her. Team leader Ung even personally gave her a carton of soy milk. Yeon-young also apologized. Coming to Hye-ran, she even gave her the documents she had collected, planning to prepare for the 70-minute special report earlier. Yeon-young pleaded with Hye-ran to help her, because she knew her husband had been harmed by Kang-jun, and promised to give Hye-ran all the materials from the recent trial. Yeon-young worried that her husband, Prosecutor Byun, would be blacklisted forever. Han, upon hearing this, said she wanted to meet him. Byung-woo Hyun was now ready to accept his situation. He wanted to give up, but Hye-ran argued that as a prosecutor, he had to resolve things like a prosecutor should. Even if it was the end, he couldn't just let Kang and Han run rampant. Han wanted Byung-woo Hyun to give her evidence of Kang-jun's perjury. It seemed Byung-woo Hyun went to see his superior, submitting his resignation along with documents about the illegal bidding by Kang-hee Construction. Byung-woo Hyun said that him leaving now wouldn't do any good, but that his superior should use him to investigate the illegal activities of the Kang-jun law firm and restore honor to the prosecutors. Meanwhile, JBC's newsroom was preparing to broadcast the scandalous actions of the Kang-jun law firm. The anchor for this report would be Han Jae-won. Right at that moment, the vice president, furious, stormed in to stop them from broadcasting the news segment, even suspending the entire newsroom. But it wasn't going to be that easy. Director Jang was no pushover. He was just as enraged. He immediately pulled out a video of the vice president's son engaging in lewd behavior and threatened him. If he dared to interfere with them airing the report, Director Jang would make sure he knew what it was like to be infamous. Meanwhile, Byung-woo Hyan had obtained a search warrant and immediately seized all the documents in Kang and Han's office. With no one to stop them, the news segment was quickly broadcast. The segment included video evidence of the law firm Kang manipulating and fabricating testimonies. This time, they had no way out. Hai-ran, overworked, fainted at this point. Tae-wook, hearing the news, rushed to her side. On another note, Baek Dong-hyan's autopsy revealed no signs of physical assault, and a large amount of sleeping pills was found on the shirt he was wearing at the time. Therefore, it was speculated that Baek Dong-hyan committed suicide due to negative emotions. However, Yoon-ju didn't believe it. She was truly devastated as people close to her were passing away one by one. She took to the streets with a sign accusing Hai-ran. Hai-ran woke up to find her in-laws at her house. She assumed they would continue to criticize her, but to her surprise, her father-in-law asked if she wanted to move forward. Seeing her determined attitude to keep pushing forward, it was clear that they were accepting her as their daughter-in-law. While Hai-ran was looking for something, she accidentally saw Tae-wook's traffic ticket. It turned out that the night Tae-wook chased Kevin Lee, he ran a red light. Tae-wook remembered he hadn't grabbed the ticket and rushed back to get it, only to be a step too late. Myung-woo went to find Yoon-ju, who was still stubbornly protesting. Myung-woo advised Yoon-ju to stop while she still had the chance, because all she wanted was for Go Hai-ran to suffer. Yoon-ju still believed that Go Hai-ran was the perpetrator and would never accept the ruling. Myung-woo threatened, if she didn't stop, the consequences would be unpredictable. As it turns out, Myung-woo was the one who harmed Baek Dong-hyan because he stubbornly believed that Go Hai-ran was the perpetrator and wanted to harm her. Yoon-ju couldn't believe it, listening to Myung-woo's words. Hai-ran, while cleaning at home, accidentally found Tae-wook's clothes from that day, and they still had the tags on them. While she was wondering about it, she received a call from the court. They called Hai-ran to pick up evidence, a pin. Unexpectedly, when she returned, she encountered the police. Hai-ran didn't want to see this person again, so she wanted to leave quickly. But he purposely called her back. He said that it was because of this pin that he suspected her. He still didn't understand why this pin was found in Kevin's car. He suspected that Tae-wook was the real perpetrator. Tae-wook came home and didn't see his wife, so he called Song-yi. Knowing that Hai-ran had invited everyone out for a celebration that afternoon, he asked her to call him when it was over. Hai-ran got drunk and Song-yi took her home. Believing that her best friend could reconcile with her husband from now on, Song-yi unexpectedly saw some distance between them. The next morning, Yoon-ju was still protesting in front of the building. Suddenly, Song-yi approached, said she was a reporter, and asked if she wanted to talk. Hai-ran just woke up and received a call from her best friend, saying she would meet her at her house. Unexpectedly, just as she hung up the phone, someone smashed the car window. Hai-ran waited at home, growing increasingly anxious as Song-yi didn't arrive. She decided to call Song-yi, only to be told by the person who answered that Song-yi was in the hospital. Hai-ran rushed to the hospital, surprised to find Director Jang there. It was then she learned that Director Jang had asked Song-yi to talk to Yoon-ju on his behalf. Hai-ran was furious and confronted him, questioning why he would do such a thing and if he didn't trust her. She then discovered that even after the court declared her innocent, Yoon-ju had never accepted the verdict. Hai-ran went to find Yoon-ju to challenge her about what she had said to Song-yi. Yoon-ju casually responded that she and Song-yi had discussed Hai-ran's husband, Tae-wook, specifically mentioning the contents of the dashcam footage. It turned out that after Song-yi learned Tae-wook had deleted the video, she wondered why he would do that when it would clearly help their case. After some thought, Tae-wook realized that if the footage were revealed, the person most upset wouldn't be Hai-ran, but him. To him, whether his wife was guilty or not wasn't the real issue. The important thing was that the image of his wife having an affair was a source of shame for him. Hai-ran didn't want to believe it was true, and she was devastated. The man she loved was ultimately revealed to be driven by jealousy. It seemed Yoon-ju's goal was achieved, to make her miserable. Meanwhile, Tae-wook had booked plane tickets for a trip. He and Hai-ran had once talked about traveling together to a place where no one knew them, just the two of them. When Hai-ran got home, she found a credit card statement that clearly showed the date they had purchased the dress. Overwhelmed with pain, she confronted him. Are you really the killer? It turned out that on that night, Tae-wook came home, saw Hai-ran's missing brooch, and lost it. He remembered Kevin Lee's provocation and couldn't help but go after him. During their argument, a scuffle broke out, and Tae-wook unintentionally killed him. He was in shock and disbelief. The situation had unfolded so quickly and dangerously. Tae-wook quickly staged the scene to look like a traffic accident and then took the earliest bus out of town. Hearing the confession from her own husband, Hai-ran felt like her heart was pierced by 1,000 wounds. She went to the hospital and looked at her injured best friend in the bed. Yoon-ju arrived then as well, admitting that she will leave now and blaming herself. Had she not returned to Korea with her husband, she wouldn't have met Hai-ran again, and all of this wouldn't have happened. Hai-ran went to the broadcasting station and drank her sorrows away. She was consumed by despair. In the past, whenever she was troubled, she would go to Song-yi for comfort. But now Song-yi was lying there, and she had no one. Unexpectedly, she ran into Myung-woo. He came to say a final goodbye. Myung-woo said that he never regretted his actions because she was worth it, and he hoped she wouldn't blame herself anymore. Tae-wook knew that everything was beyond saving. Today, he went home to have dinner with his parents. They were a bit surprised that he didn't bring his wife along. His father sensed that something was wrong with his son. Initially, he thought that his son was going away on a long business trip. But then his son confessed that he had killed Kevin Lee. Song-yi woke up and urgently called Hai-ran, telling her to stop Tae-wook. Apparently, before Song-yi went to see Hai-ran, she'd gone to Tae-wook to ask him to explain his intentions. Hai-ran then learned that Tae-wook had wanted them to take a trip alone together, after which he planned to turn himself in. Remembering when Tae-wook came home, Hai-ran frantically searched everywhere for him. Finally, she found him standing in front of a painting. Because they couldn't take the trip, Tae-wook gave the 2 tickets to his manager, telling him to go on vacation with his family. A few days later, he also sensed something was off. Maybe he knew something, too. Hai-ran really couldn't bear to see him go like that. She couldn't leave him. It was clear that they both loved each other, but there was too much distance between them. They just couldn't overcome their mistakes and prejudices to be together. The outcome was beyond salvage. She went to work, went to see director Jang, gave him something, and told him he absolutely had to make it the lead story for the primetime news broadcast. Tae-wook went to the police station to turn himself in. He was determined to face the punishment he deserved. But unexpectedly, Myung-woo had gotten there first. He confessed to all the crimes, saying that he was the one who had hurt Kevin Lee, and that he was also responsible for Baek Dong-hyun's death. Detective Kang naturally didn't believe him, because at the time of Kevin Lee's death, Myung-woo was still in prison. Myung-woo claimed he had hired someone to do it, and there was evidence found during the search of Myung-woo's residence. Detective Kang could do nothing but accept Myung-woo's statement in order to close the case. At the broadcasting station, Director Jang received the news and immediately ordered an investigation into Myung-woo to air on the news. Hai-ran received this news and was shocked. She didn't expect the outcome to be like this. The director said that the news about the culprit turning himself in was currently the truth. He then slipped the note she gave him into his coat pocket. Tae-wook returned home and received an envelope from the assistant. Apparently, before Myung-woo turned himself in, he asked the manager to give this letter to Tae-wook. Inside was a message: "He must protect Go Hai-ran. That is the punishment you must receive." Yoon-ju didn't understand why Myung-woo would do this. She still believed that everything that happened between her and Myung-woo was all Go Hai-ran's fault. But unexpectedly, things turned out the way they did today, and the beginning stemmed from Yoon-ju herself. Apparently, years ago, after school, Myung-woo waited for Hai-ran to walk home with her, but he couldn't find her. At that moment, someone came out and said she went to the pawn shop to borrow money, but also mentioned that he didn't understand why the owner would call Hai-ran into the shop as it was closing up. He also heard that the owner had a bad reputation for being rough with female students. Myung-woo was horrified and rushed over there. That was what led to the case that year. Yoon-ju finally realized that it all started with her, and tragically, she herself turned their lives into a tragedy. Everything continued according to fate. Each of them had to pay for their actions. They all had to suffer because of their choices. Life had to continue, even though no one knew what was at the end of the road or where it would lead. Hai-Ran accepted a new program. Today, Ti-Wook was supposed to be the guest, but he would probably never come.